We as human beings are by nature unfinished business.
I, in my mind, see a border between responsibility versus happiness and joy.
Every time I go out, I want to see something I haven't seen before.
Suffering is inevitable and existential thoughts are inevitable, so keep yourself busy so you don't think about the fact that you're going to die.
I really question the value and future of nation states. If you would have had, as a population, to mandate someone to organize the logistics for vaccination, I would have said, Jeff Bezos, that's for you.
Today I'm here with Hannes Chopra, arguably one of the most influential people in my life right now, one of the best teachers I've ever had. Would you like to introduce yourself professionally?
Sure. I mean, first of all, Roham, thanks a lot for doing this and for these nice words about me. That's very humbling to hear.
Oh, thank you.
I'm, what can I say professionally? I'm a certified executive coach, and I work a lot in leadership development with management teams usually, or coach CEOs, which is a topic which fascinates me. Creating or being part of making a difference with teams, with people who have a lot of responsibility for other people. And that's a very gratifying and fascinating work. You really see an impact. The second thing, yes, I also teach in different roles, although I think I learned in teaching that you actually have to redefine it. It is basically public learning. Teaching is public learning because I learn the most whenever I teach. So, and that makes it so interesting for me. So I'm basically now also for myself, whenever one thing is the formal roles, like in Haberspace when I have classes, or I also work with CEOs in YPO and have some teaching assignments there. But informally, I'm very, very curious. And one of the beauties of the lockdown is that I can spend a lot of time learning every day. So that's why for me it's really public learning is actually teaching. So whilst people think I'm telling them something, actually I'm learning most. And the third thing is I manage a small insurtech fund. We invest in early stage, pre-seed, seed, round A companies which in some way either complement or disrupt the insurance value chain. And it's a fascinating activity also. There's so much going on. Insurance, without a doubt, is probably one of the most backward and non-customer oriented businesses with a very specific language, which is difficult for customers to understand. Although the original idea of insurance is an amazing social contract within society, which got forgotten a bit. And moving this business area, which has been the focus of my life before I did what I'm doing now, into the future, because of technology, new customer requirements, I find super fascinating. And there's a lot of room there to grow. So that's, I think, about my professional activities.
Are you happy with what you do?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Happy, yes. I'm joyful and impactful and explorative. These are important categories for me. The happy for me sounds a bit too short-lived. If my favorite team scores a goal, I'm happy. But a couple of minutes later, this is forgotten. So joy is for me a deeper inner state of mind, and this I am, yes.
So this is actually one of the things that I've been struggling the most since your class, Limitless Human Becoming, which is essentially, for those who don't know, how can I put this in words, a recipe or a booster package for becoming a better human in this world. Is that an accurate representation of the class?
More or less, I would take away the word better. I would just leave it to become a human, because the way we are brought up, the institutions we are supposed to go through, whether it's kindergarten, usually also parenting, school, then university, they neither prepare us to be human, nor do they really allow us to be human. And unfortunately, they completely miss the point what life could be about. I'm not saying I know what life is about. I have some hypotheses, and these hypotheses make so much more sense to me. Again, although I don't know for sure, but for sure they make much more sense to me than all what I learned when I went through these institutions. And unfortunately, in these institutions, the person doesn't matter. You, with your life, you don't matter. It's important that you become a good product later, which can then find some work, can feed a family, and behave in a certain way. So, and that's what I don't call life. Life is if, like, Roham exuberates every single moment of what life is giving to him, and can approach it with an explorative way. So that's what we try to detect and get a bit closer to in this course. And it's actually discovery. It's an exploration. That's why I have difficulties in calling it teaching, because I hope I can trigger a few thoughts or reflections, but not more.
Well, you definitely have for me. I loved it. I took it the first time, and I was 17. I was just basically a kid. I just moved out of my parents' house, and I was like, okay, who am I? What is happening? And it was really helpful. It was actually 100 times more helpful the second time I took it. But there's still some major issue that I'm struggling with, which is I, in my mind, see a border between responsibility and duty versus happiness and joy. Now, you separated joy from happiness, and I sort of hadn't looked at it that way before. But do you see a border between responsibility and duty, and happiness and joy?
What is your hypothesis there, that if you want happiness or if you want joy, then there's a contradiction to duty and responsibility?
Somewhat, yes. For example, I enjoy most of the things I do. I enjoy this podcast, but I also see it as my duty, mainly because I don't like how my arguments are at the moment, and I'm trying to sort of tune my arguments to the sound of other people's arguments, so that I can be closest to the truth. Also sharing with the world, I enjoy that. But then there are things that I don't necessarily enjoy, but I have to do, the chores of life. And I like to take on a lot of those. And I like to do it as thoroughly as I possibly can, even if it comes at the cost of me taking one day off during the weekend that I really need to, or to going to a party or whatever it is, basically. And I don't know what to do there.
Look, I don't really see a contradiction there. I will try to explain why. As an aspect of the question is, how do I approach everything I do in life, and how consciously I do everything I do in life. And consciously means if I know it is necessary for my life to flourish, to be the best possible one I have, then I can have a relationship to it, and I can say, okay, I'm going to do it. Let's take potential activities which, let's say, might contradict joy or happiness. Let it be cleaning the dishes, let it be ironing, let it be, all this daily stuff. But I understand why I do it and why it's necessary. And I know, especially when you live in a like social setting called family, that waiting for others to do it will not really bring results. So I do it. The question is, with what mindset do I do it? Is it something I have to do? Or is it something where we had this topic, I can create for myself a narrative which allows me to do this with any amount of joy, at least being neutral about it. Ironing clothes, like cleaning dishes, and by the way, I'm still from a generation when there was no dishwashers. Like you had a big party or you had friends at home. The evening ended with like 2 hours of cleaning everything by hand and then taking a cloth and wiping it all dry. So, and I'm reminded of this, and I remind myself every time when I put in things in the dishwasher and when I take them out, because I realize how lucky I am. So and those processes can become highly meditative processes, because actually I'm given an activity which I know I need to do, which is very easy to do, and it's my choice to put a judgment there or to make it a meditative process. But it's a choice. It doesn't come naturally. There is no formula which says cleaning the dishes equals bad. This is a perception you might have, but this is a perception you created, so you can also change it. And if you start to approach things, we had this. We briefly shared this with the Shaolin philosophy, putting love into things you do. This is a conscious process. You put love into something, as small as it is, as so small or profound it can be. It can be any walk. It can be cleaning the dishes. It can be brushing teeth. It can be anything. But the question, what would putting love into this mean, is a very good question. And once you have an answer, okay, this is how this small process can become at least an interesting, perhaps not the most profound, although also this is possible, but an interesting experience. And even if you do it repetitively, I have this with some of my coaching clients who say, look, it's like so difficult, and I go around because of lockdown, I can hardly go out, so I just take a walk out, and I just can't see this anymore. It's always the same, 50 meters I walk. And I tell them, look, I do the same. But what I tell myself is every time I go out, I want to see something I haven't seen before. The same way I go. I want to see something I haven't seen before. And Roham, you cannot imagine how blind I am. Because every time I go, it doesn't even take 20 seconds, I discover something, I say, was this here before? And then I reflect a bit, I say, yeah, it was there before, I never saw it. Let it be a leaf, let it be anything. So what I'm trying to say is, how you approach the simplest of life situations and make them valuable is completely in your hand. But the underlying notion is something which unfortunately we are not told when we grow up. The underlying notion is, David Brooks puts this very nicely. We as human beings are by nature unfinished business. We are always unfinished business because of these unique abilities we have. And there's very few great creatures where you can say this about. Human beings for sure are by nature unfinished business. What this means is also, it means a lot of things, but what this means is also that nothing which requires your involvement can ever be automized. There's never a button and you press it and it just goes like this and you can be somewhere absent. So even the most boring of tasks is part of this, we are unfinished business. I cleaned the dishes yesterday, I have to do this tomorrow again, and day after, and day after, and day after, and day after. There is an involvement I have. So the choice is how do I deal with this involvement? How do I make this as close to life as possible, meaning as explorative as possible? If it's true that we are by nature unfinished business, then everything we do is just exploration. It's never finite. By the way, one of the big issues, if you look at schools, universities, companies, the big problem is the notion that we want humans who are finished business. And you, Roham, looking at the finished business I wanted to see from you as a teacher, as a professor, and what I have seen, what you've done, you're only 70% finished. That's wrong. You are never finished. You are by nature unfinished. The only thing I can do is to say, where do I put a little bit of more focus and intensity to work on this unfinished part? But never to expect that it's finished. And this is the finiteness or the illusion of finiteness of life, which is created through all educational institutions. I got this grade in this year in school. Oh my God, I'm bad. I'm this. Oh, I'm super great. I did not manage this. Oh, I'm bad. If you understand your unfinished business, it is just one step for many, many steps to come. And this one step tells you, how can I take the next step in a little bit different way? That it'll make me experience life more, enjoy more. It's a completely different mindset. And when we come to responsibility and duty, that is, I've been especially talking about these basic things, which one might not like, but how I relate to those activities, which I know they are needed, decides a lot. So responsibility in the first sense means it's a responsibility to myself. And a duty I have to myself. And there I don't see a contradiction that duty and responsibility contradict with joy. What is true though, this I don't argue with, that as they say in one of the old Indian scripts, it says that many things which taste in the beginning like nectar, they turn out to become actually hell. And many things which look like hell to you in the beginning, they become later nectar. That is part of life. That's exploration. Nectar meaning when you put in a lot of effort and you do it and you do it and you do it, and later you see how slowly something is working, whether you're learning to play soccer, whether you're doing skateboarding, whether it's anything in life, learning a musical instrument. In the beginning, it's sometimes it feels like hell.
Yes.
But you should know that one aspect of life is, and by the way, we all did this when we were small. Mm-hmm. How did you learn to walk?
Just failed and tried again.
And tried again. And again, and again, and again, and again. That you as a parent cannot watch anymore and say, my goodness, when will this stop? And again, guy stands up, falls down, or girl stands up, falls down. This approach to life, to understand that many things which we truly want to achieve will require that every day I do something um, which will bring me somewhere. But I only see this portion. Like I like the saying from Muhammad Ali. When I grew up and I went to the gym every day, I realized um, I either have a good time now, but will never become a champion, or I work hard every day, and when I'm champion, I've achieved what I wanted. That's my choice. And I decided to do the second, to go every day to the gym and work out and do my boxing exercise, because I knew there's something I want to get there. And I knew it'll take many, 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 many small steps. So everything which is instant gratification has very little value.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you do which gives you immediate happiness, over time, you yourself will get bored with it. Because there's really nothing much into it. Many things which are really, really powerful and make a difference in your life, they require this, one slice, next slice, next slice, next slice. And again, how are you moving away from these chores? How do you approach this every day? Is your choice. If you're doing anything, if you're a runner, if you're a soccer player, if you're a student, how you approach every day going to the lesson, running, the exercise, that's your choice. You can call it joy, you can call it duty. How do you make it an experience that it's joy? That is actually the interesting and fascinating question. You know it needs to be done. How can you enjoy this? And make this an experience that you say, amazing, I didn't even realize what I was doing, but it was such a nice experience of doing it. So I think there is a wrong notion about that the role of life is to provide us happiness all the time. It is not.
What about the other way, that the role of life is basically suffering?
Not at all. Life is, as I mentioned, if we are unfinished business, life is about constant learning and exploration. And with this mindset going into everything. No, it is not. It's not suffering. I'm just saying that this sense of, at least when I was born, neither my mother nor my father, or if you believe in fate, soul, God, anybody told me, throughout your life, you will be happy. I guarantee you. Here is the document. I've signed it. Keep it. Whenever you're unhappy, come back to me. I never heard these words. But we are somehow brought up with this sense of entitlement, that the world owes us. When we feel we are unhappy or something happens to us, there is this feeling, hey, why me? Why is this happening to me? Whilst every moment where things go really well, a moment like now, where we are talking to each other,
Don't even think about it.
We don't even think about it. We also don't think about the 999 things which could happen now, where we would complain again. So we grow up with a certain sense of entitlement by completely not understanding that life is not an entitlement. Life is not something where you are given a promise of happiness, which then again is something external. Joy is something very internal, and nobody has ever given a promise. So the earlier you get the sense away, considering the normal as normal, consuming it, and when it's abnormal, asking these fundamental questions, why is this happening to me? The the better your life will be. But that's a wrong notion. That's a completely wrong notion.
You know, I have basically two ways of looking at this. It's that, okay, one part is sort of similar to what you said. There will always be something that you would not really necessarily want to do in that moment, but just accept it and actually have fun with it. And whatever. I mean, I wasn't a fan of running. Now I am somewhat of a fan of running because of this. And then there's another one, which is that suffering is inevitable and existential thoughts are inevitable. So keep yourself busy. And this is like the gloomier way of looking at it. Keep yourself busy so you don't think about the fact that you're going to die. But anyway, I'm
No, but look, I mean, it's true that, look, only knowing that any moment, life can be over. Only because you know this, every moment can be so profound and so unique. This goes hand in hand. And again, to creating this awareness about awareness, saying, hey, isn't this great to be here and sit here and do what I do, feel what I feel, being able to be who I am. Creating this awareness of awareness gives you huge chances of having some real profound experience of life. So I think the thought of knowing that our time here is finite can be very, very powerful, like booster to realize how special every moment is we live. And focus us really on the things we want to do. And you know what I also ask myself when, like what you mentioned, I think there's one other question. Whenever I would feel there's something I don't like, for me the question is, why don't I like it? What is actually behind this? What was actually the hypothesis I had in mind, which is behind this not liking? And why did I give it a label? And I learned very interesting things about myself. The dialogue I get into, like if I don't like running, and I usually do this like in the morning, and I don't do it, why don't I like it? Is it because it's too cold? Is it because I get tired? Is it because it's just, it takes energy? Could be any of those. And then I asked myself, okay, it means I'm somewhat being thrown out of my comfort zone. Then I asked myself, do I want this? Do I want to go out of my comfort zone? Is there something explorative where I feel there's something I want to explore there by going out of the comfort zone? And when I say yes, I do it. And usually the answer is yes. Because I realize very often that what I put there, the moment I understand it requires energy for me to do this, which for whatever reason I don't want to put. And I make this choice in front of me saying, okay, look, do I want to make this a growth zone or stay in my comfort zone? And it's not a good or bad decision. There can also be a moment and a very good decision saying, this is an area I don't want to be in a growth zone. Okay, stay in the comfort zone. But don't label it then. Don't be upset later. Don't have a bad conscience that you didn't run. You take a deliberate decision, fine, it's no problem. Again, nobody told you when you were born, Roham, you should run. You should move. No, it's all made up by yourself. So you have this honest dialogue with yourself, saying, okay, no, there are other areas where I want to grow myself. So in this area, it's not something I want to go further right now, and that's okay. But then make a click in your head and say, lay it to rest. Don't wake up in 2 days and say, damn it.
Regretting
I
it.
should run.
Yeah.
It's be clear what you do and why you do it. And even if you realize after 3 days, hey, this was a wrong decision, smile at yourself. Say, hey, Roham, see? Unfinished business. You can be wrong. No problem. 3 days ago, will not come back. Do I want it now? Stand up, run. The rest is wasted emotions, energy, whatever.
So live a life of no regrets. That's...
Look, regrets are, rewinding.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You rewind your life, and so they're very unproductive, and they don't help, because we can only live life forward. We can't live it backward. So having some reflection and saying, okay, what did I learn from this? What stays from that? Great. Otherwise, nothing. I think in French, Joey calls it's a moot point. Completely irrelevant. So, yeah, that's how I see it.
Was becoming a parent outside of your comfort zone?
Oh. Yes, and so much more. I mean, I will never forget. This was, I believe, really my most profound moment in my life when I saw my kids. I have twin boys. It is so magic, so humbling, so unique when you see really the force of nature displaying itself in front of you. It is incredible. It's an incredible experience. Just to see this, this life in front of you. It's a completely different dimension which is added to your life once you become a parent. Sadly, unfortunately, I have to also add that nowhere you get prepared for that.
It's
nowhere.
The biggest responsibility.
It is, right, Roham. It is actually absurd. It is the biggest job and responsibility you have. And look at for what small things we need a degree, we need to pass exams, we need to have a driving license, we need to register, we need to parent like anybody can be. And that's a crime, to be honest.
It's too easy, right? Like much of 15-year-olds can do.
Yeah,
it's so dangerous.
And I consider myself very, very lucky that I got kids very late in my life. Not that I would claim I'm a very good parent, but I would have been a huge disaster as a parent if I would have had kids earlier. Huge disaster.
How old were you?
I was exactly 41.
41. So you would recommend to someone my age to wait?
Roham, I had this discussion with some other students a few days ago. I cannot recommend anything as a parent. I can share my experiences and learnings, but I cannot recommend anything because I neither have data nor I feel I'm qualified to talk about this. For me, it was important that I was already in a different phase in life, that I got kids, and and also that I got married. So for me, this was important.
You also married later.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. After I got kids.
Mhm. So what was the number one learning from having kids?
The number one learning is, well, now it's high time to become self-aware. That was the number one learning. And to become self-aware and start working with this awareness. It's high time. Because now the influence area has been extended, and being a parent is a relationship which is so deep and profound, from kids to parents, that as a parent you better have some idea who you are, what you do, how you behave, where you mess up, and how you deal with these situations. So that's for sure one big topic for being a parent, and being open about this. I mean, being self-aware and manage yourself in all the areas of life, whether that's emotional, intellectual, physiologically, energy-wise, spiritually, and being open and upfront about this with kids. So being able to say this, that there are things which work, which didn't work, things you do which were not good, acknowledging this, being very open and upfront about this is important. So that's for sure, that's one thing. The second thing, as part of this probably, but I would still be aware and careful about the parent ego. What do I mean by this? As a parent, you really want to indirectly, consciously, subconsciously, you want to be something to your kids. Some want to be a hero, some want to be this, some want to be something else. This is a problem. Don't create, like, be very critical with your parent ego. And how does it show? It shows itself. Airplane. Okay, let's imagine airplane. Family is sitting there. Let's imagine they have 2-3 kids. And the kids open, this tablet where you can then put the food. Let's say 3-4 years old, and they realize that is a great toy. And they open, close, bang, 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 bang. And the mother goes in and says, "Stop it! It's really wrong." Now it's good to educate your kid. My question there would be self-critically, if I would be sitting there. Am I really doing it that my kid learns something? Or is it because I don't want to look like a parent who hasn't control on his kids in front of all the other passengers? Is it really about my kid, or is it about my parent ego? And I'm afraid it would be much more the second than the first. Because what is the problem? If it annoys someone in front, let this person turn around and say, "Hey, this is not pleasant for me." That's a normal thing in life. That's not pleasant for me. Could you please stop?
So you wouldn't say it's the parent's responsibility to necessarily make the child representable, basically? Or would you say...
Make the child what?
Representable to society.
Oh my
able to
God.
function in society.
Not at all. You are not an object. If you would be my kid, you're not an object I'm showing around. Like when people come to my home, it's not a museum of some artifacts. Every human being, again, is a magic, like any creation is magical. As a parent, I have to be careful. That's perhaps the third thing I would reflect on. Not to limit my kids.
In any way.
In any way. Not to limit. Or wherever I limit because it's important for me, also be upfront about this. be very upfront about it, that it annoys you. So it would help you if they could do this. Is this possible? But give them the chance to say no. Fine, but don't be offended then. You know, we get this wrong. A human being, a kid is not a stone, and then or a piece of wood, and then, you know, as a carpenter you do a bit here and you do a bit there. No. A kid is like a river. It flows. The river flows. And sometimes it might be necessary a little bit, you know, to change the direction of the river, but it flows. You don't have to do anything to make it flow. You don't have to do anything to make it representable. The whole problem starts once you believe as a parent, I have to make them representable. Because what am I doing? My limitation of my brain, my emotions, my intellect, I apply on them. They are limitless human becomings. My limitations why do I make it their limitations?
Because culture.
Yes, but you know, that is so wrong. Because they are by themselves a creature. What is in them? What is important for me as a parent to understand? What is, as they call it in Vedanta and in Sanskrit, Swadharma? What is the uniqueness of my kid? What is a superpower? What is something I see which I should help this kid to develop? Where else can I be helpful? Mm-hmm. But not to limit. Limit what? Do you really believe a kid comes in this world with bad intentions, with the will and desire to kick other kids, with the will and desire to steal and to conduct crime, with the will and desire to be detrimental to everybody else? I have not seen a single being who came like this. I've unfortunately seen a few who have been made like this. Not always because, but also of parents. I haven't seen a single one creature which came with bad intentions. I haven't seen this. It does not exist.
I don't know what to think about that. This is still something that I'm discovering, whether people are born evil or made evil. I think mostly it's made evil, but...
I can... if we look at human beings and human creature, you know, inside us, we had this, I think, also in one or two of the videos. Inside us as human beings, there is this permanent desire to do something, to create something, to become more than what we are. That is very, very human. This recreate. Why are you doing the podcast? It is a desire to do more.
Yeah.
And this is so human. This is in us. And whenever we do more, it is something where we want to connect with the world. There is this urge to be in some way connected, recognized, seen, impactful. It's a very human urge. I could, you know, philosophically in Advaita Vedanta, I gave you this example. They say a human being, you remember this example, is like, you know, taking a cup of water out of the ocean. The ocean is the universe, is the oneness, is everything. The cup of water is the individual. The only difference between the ocean and the water inside this cup is the border of the cup. Just because this is a cup, this becomes ego. The more, and by the way, that's a very good analogy. The moment the water inside realizes, actually, I'm of the same substance as everything around me, as the whole world. There's so much more, Roham, between you and me, where we are the same, where we are not different. But whatever we see, wherever we go, we first look, okay, how can I be different here? What is my uniqueness? What is my ego? And now, hey, where are we together? And we have this longing of being together because we are both. We are not just ego. You remember perhaps this one video I shared with you with the lady neuroanatomist who got a stroke.
Yes.
And where the right side of her brain stopped functioning, and she felt like she has become part of everything, the left side of the brain. We have this. We are not just this one ego. We also have this clear understanding. We are social beings. We want to do something. We want to grow. We want to leave an impact. We want to leave a good footprint. We want to make a difference. This is inside us. You don't have to bring a kid into that. It is there. So there's no evilness there. The evilness comes by saying, I don't allow you to make the impact the way you want. I'm telling you, don't do it in this way. Okay, at some point, the individual will say, well, let me find other ways. But there is nothing born negative in any being. It is unfortunately only created and made up by the way people and kids and grown-ups are being treated alongside the way. And I mean, look, I told you, from kindergarten, school, university, everywhere, external opinions matter more than your own opinion. Have you ever been asked in school, when it was the days of grade, somebody saying, Roham, I will share with you your grades. Can we first talk half an hour about how did you feel in the last 6 months? How satisfied are you with what you did? Where did you struggle? What worked well comparing to a year before? Which is the progress you made? Where did you feel you didn't make a progress? And where have I been helpful and where did I not help you? And how can I help you in that? Let us have this conversation. And Roman, I will show you later the grades, but they don't matter.
Quite the opposite, actually.
So, and that's what I'm telling you. So, and if you don't do this, if every 3 months, 6 months, actually every day, you know, if you look at the classical school and a grown-up would walk parallel to a kid and would make notes about how they emotionally feel if they would be the kid, I give you a promise. After 1 week, no grown-up would let their kid anymore being in a school. Because what we put kids through in a classical school, no adult would ever accept in a workplace as an environment. Constantly judged, constantly commented on, somebody always telling you this was good, this was bad, and at the end getting a grade. How? How should that ever work? That out of this, at some point, some reaction comes saying, okay, is anybody really interested in me? I want to do something. It has nothing to do with this, with that. It's not even reflected in my grades because what are we doing here? We are learning content on topics where I know 5 years from now, I won't remember any of this content. I don't remember anything I learned in school. And it's not because of parents, of teachers. I had good teachers. Why? Because the content was not relevant to me. I was told I should learn, so I learned, but it was not relevant to me. If I would have been able to come with questions and getting into a dialogue and having an explorative experience, and it would have been about me detecting things, I would remember lots of things. So this, whether you want to call it evil or, there is a deformation of human spirit, human soul, along the way when they are being educated. And this shows itself in some way or the other. And that is the tragedy of our lives. And by the way, one of the reasons why I felt perhaps we can provide a platform to talk about this, that is limitless human becoming. But that is what is happening. So deformation after deformation. It's not about you. It's not about anyone. It's about you being, again, a good participant of society the way society wants you. And that is not the idea of life. That is so against everything what life is about. And that's why there is this mismatch. So being a parent is profound, is deep, is tough. It's a huge, huge task, and it is 360. You know, it's like being a parent or being, you know, sometimes even in, well, as a leader you can choose. As a parent you can't choose. There is no switch on, switch off button as a parent.
24/7, all the time.
24/7. Anything you do, anything you say, anything you feel, anything which goes on, any behavior, any step, you're always on display. Always. So it's good to be prepared for that.
Now I'm gonna drive the conversation a little towards politics.
Sure.
So I come from a country where propaganda is the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see what's happening, let's say in Russia now, I'm not sure what to believe. You know, I've seen the documentary that Navalny put out. I've sort of tried to study what's happening actually within the high ranks of the sort of Russian government and the oligarchy, but I don't necessarily know what to believe. And I think you're probably the best person I have in my network to ask about this. What is happening in Russia and what's the future like?
Look, I have the same issue as you mentioned, and I'm not an insider, and now okay, I don't live there also anymore, so I can, let's say, as an interested citizen or human, I can just give my view there. I mean, I'm fascinated by this country and its people. I lived there for 14 years. Some of the most warm and wonderful people I've ever met. And once you become like part of their group, of their society, which is not so difficult, they're not closed. They're really, really warm, very open, very honest. So, I mean, really, really unique and wonderful people, and very, very, you know, from the heart and soul. Incredibly talented. I mean, I have like the capabilities people have there, whether it's entrepreneurial, whether it's technical. Amazing people. And you see how many companies, startups, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in the US, anywhere, are basically created by Russians. And, you know, at the same time, you have a country which has certain traditions. And certain, let's say, sensitive areas, like every country. I remember, for example, in Germany, inflation is a very sensitive topic. So when inflation goes a few percentage points up, it's like a kind of topic. And this is still from, I wouldn't go that far to call it a national trauma, but it is something which is still from the time of the Great Depression in the 30s with hyperinflation. But there's still this fear, okay, we don't want this ever again. That, you know, I mean, the value of money within seconds just disappears. So, you know, that's what I mean. There is always some national specifics you have to know. What I learned with a lot of people in Russia, there's a high value for stability and security. And looking at the last 40, 50, 60 years of the country, not really a surprise. I mean, there were smaller ups and downs, larger ups and downs. I mean, literally every couple of years, where people either lost their savings, or they got into half, or there was something else where permanently some external factors came and basically made it very difficult for people to live in some way a certain continuous, more or less stable life.
This is after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yes, if you look, 98 in August, the Russian government declared default. The years before, under the years under Yeltsin, very difficult years, hyperinflation, the new ruble. There was the economic plan, which led to a lot of bankruptcies, and literally the government being bankrupt, having no money. No new tax system yet which worked. In the Soviet Union, there was a very good, and everybody was taken care of in the healthcare system there. Struggled with that, many struggles, and not all of those struggles, or let's say revolutions or inconsistencies, or economic challenges, were always reported back into the West. But for people, it was basically every 2-3 years something awful happened. So the notion of having some stability and some security, and being able to live in a normal way and earn some money and build a life, is super important to lots of people. Super important. As this was not there. I had actually this question in my mind for quite some time, and I asked a couple of, I think it was like 100 young people. I thought I want to make a bit of a study there. Whether they would be willing to sacrifice freedom, and knowing that, for example, politicians and some oligarchs have some connections with each other, so it's not completely free from both sides. So freedom of press, knowing such things, freedom of speech, of everything. If there would be a trade-off between having lesser of these freedoms, but not compromising on stability and security, what would you choose? The answer for more than 85%, it's a few years ago when I asked this, was for sure, I don't want to sacrifice on security and stability. And these were young people. And this gives you an idea how important it is to them. You know, let me have, what does this mean, stability? Let me have a life planning horizon which is more than a week or a month or a year. So this is what, as I understood, really matters to people. That there is a certain predictability of how things will develop. And that is very much ingrained and very understandable, as I felt and feel looking at what Russia and before the Soviet Union went through. And by the way, which you can also see in a couple of the neighboring countries who do not have this, where it's more unstable. So there's a high value there.
Are you referencing Belarus specifically, or?
No, I would literally every other of these countries. If you look at the Stan countries like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, they all had their ups and downs, their uncertainties. The Caucasian countries, recently Belarus, but that's on one page. On the other page, of course, there is a desire and an increasing desire to move into a system and that is the conflict, which would allow for more transparency, for more democratic grassroots involvement, and ideally with no compromise on stability. And that is the struggle. Because this is usually very, very difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. Every change in the system will always bring in some instability. And that is the struggle there. In as I see it again now from the outside, which, by the way, if you look historically, and from the West, we should not be arrogant there. If you look historically, is a very common development in societies. That's how all societies, which now call themselves or live in a parliamentary democracy, this is how all of these countries have come to this. They were in similar situations. Then there were struggles. Then there were some types of turmoil, sometimes government change, sometimes a coup, sometimes other activities, and it brought them step by step into a different system. So it is not such an unusual struggle we watch. I sometimes get the impression when I read the press as if, this is like, oh wow, I mean, all the countries developed like that, and now there's suddenly this country, Russia, and they develop so differently to others. Not at all. You look at the US, 18th, 19th century, how they from a country where, a couple of, how would I call them? Well, in the modern context, one would probably call them oligarchs, were running the country and businesses, and there was like more and more the need for aligning with some rules, and they had monopolies. They were not very good to their workers, and slowly they developed into a different type of society. So this was a long, long process. And there, if you look at the breakdown of the Soviet Union, which was 30 years ago just, that's no time for a nation. So that's why there is a certain development which is about to happen and which will happen, but it'll take time. And, let us always be, I would really wish everyone, also in Russia, the life and the freedoms I have. I don't know, really don't know, whether everyone would want it again in the same way again, if the price would be to have some lesser stability and security. I'm not sure. The answers I got were no. We rather compromise a bit on freedom, but we don't want to lose what we have now in terms of a certain predictability of life. And I have to respect this.
But does Putin's government provide that for everyone, that stability and that security?
Look, let's say for a vast majority, it does. For a vast majority, as they perceive it, it does. And I have lots of sympathy also. I mean, for all activities, for what is happening in terms of having more liberty, in terms of having more like individual rights and becoming more democratic. But again, as I say this as an outsider, it's really important that inside the country people say, how quickly do I want it? Do I want it? If yes, how quickly do I want it? And what am I ready to give up for that? And look, many Russians still remember how the Soviet Union broke down, how Yeltsin then took over, how Russia was created, all the instability, how the building of the government, the White House was in Moscow, was basically shot with tanks.
The
This was
Kremlin.
30 years ago.
The Kremlin was shot.
No, this is the president place. The government seat is usually in the White House, as they call it, where all the prime minister
Okay.
and the ministers usually sit. So this has been not so long ago, and people remember this. And you know, there's always this notion that there is a right or wrong political system. I think that there's always something right or wrong related to the time and what people want. And frankly, I think it's also high time for us in Europe, in what is so often called the Western world, to rethink our political system. And to say, okay, what would actually work best, the way we want to be governed. Because a lot of the principles we have are still from a time when many things which are there now, a certain amount of transparency, information, technology, where you could know lots of things. A lot of the systems are from a time when this was not possible. There was a few people who could know what is going on. So they were representing the whole country, representative parliamentary democracy. I think it is in general high time to think about what would be, in a digitalized technological world where anybody, any given time can know anything, the system which would maximize liberty, happiness, wealth, and rights of the individuals and an ability to govern. I think we need recalibration here. Very, very clearly. We need to rethink very profoundly what is needed. For example, we take Europe. I see a lot of sense in strengthening Europe, or the European Union, European Commission. But then we have to be honest and say the next layer below it cannot be nations, but this would then have to be regions. And then you have a Europe of regions, and where you have, Catalonia, you have Andalusia, you have Bavaria, you have, the Alsace-Lothringen. And by the way, COVID has shown this a bit.
The basically endless battles between the states. And
local and regional was where things really moved and happened. And national was looking a little bit around, saying, okay, what do we do now? And look, it's so logical. Because when it really comes to making things valid and approachable and experienceable for people, of course it's local and regional. So I really question the value and future of nation states. I'm not sure whether this is the layer we need in future.
I don't know about that one. Guys, okay, I'm really glad the European Union exists. I think it's a great force for the world and for Europe itself, and it's given me the opportunity to be here right now, the existence of it and its policies. But it also has a lot of problems. It's mind-numbingly bureaucratic. It's got political agendas that I'm not questioning whether they're right or wrong. They're just political agendas that may not necessarily be representative of Europeans. And Europeans seem to be going more towards sort of nationalism, here in Spain with Vox, you have Viktor Orban, we have Andrzej Duda, we have a lot of people that are not necessarily pro-European and not necessarily... Did you actually see a world where we won't have... Sorry, okay, I'll rephrase again. Do you see a world where we can actually get rid of nation states in Europe? Or, yeah, let's focus on Europe. And do you, if not, then what will happen to European Union? Because they seem to have an existential crisis.
Look, I could imagine this, that nation states get more and more back. I'm afraid that nation states themselves don't want it, but it would be time. Because over time, it will not work that you have European Union, European Commission, and nation states, and regions. This will not work. Because the whole sense of European Union will only be more and more once it really has a role which is not fulfilled by others. Right now, it's a little bit of a double whammy. You know, a lot is decided by countries, then they come to European level, then they try to get some compromise, but the real value of having such a supranational coordination is problematic, as long as the next layer is one where it's always about proportion, who's from where, which commissioner do we appoint, who hasn't yet gotten a seat, which country, which region. I believe a regional context would be much more powerful. I'm with you. I think the European or Europe and European Union is a phenomenal invention. And I'm not so skeptical as you. I do not believe they're in an existential crisis. I think whether we like the policies or not, I was more critical to it, honestly. They managed the very severe, and let's not forget, this was just a few years ago, crisis of potential default of states within Europe, of Greece, and also some other countries were close to it. There is a lot of potential, but there are some fundamental questions. How much do we want a European foreign policy? How much do we want a European trade policy? I really believe that once COVID is being handled, a lot of fundamental questions will be discussed, also as a result of Brexit, which would have been discussed now if there wouldn't have been COVID. Because Brexit was a good lesson for many who were perhaps somewhere in their heart thinking, we might also leave the EU. I think many have understood that it's not a really good idea. And so it's basically, ironically, Brexit is a PR campaign for the EU. And we are just at the beginning of this campaign. We will see much worse.
I'm glad that the European Union really gave Britain a hard time. I would say that the vaccination process is very bad PR for the EU, but hopefully we'll get over it. One more thing I see with the EU, with the problem is that politicians who get to, let's say, the European Commission first basically have to pass the ladder of, okay, run for mayor, then run for parliament in your own country, and then by the time you get to being part of the European Parliament, you're probably in your 60s or 50s, and you've been in the establishment so long that you have zero ideas of your own. It's just what the party says or what your peers say. And that's a global problem. That's not just necessarily it's more exaggerated in the EU, but how do we deal with that?
I fully agree to you. And I mean, if I look at, I had most of my upbringing in Germany. If I look at the politicians who who were running for the EU Parliament, most of them didn't make it in regional or national parliament. So that was the kind of, okay, we somehow need to give you some seats, so why don't you run for the European Parliament? So it's been always second best. And also this is one of the reasons why I say this has to stop. There should be one parliament, let it be the European one, don't have all these national parliaments, or at least if you keep them, the more you have this conversion within Europe, which is basically happening with one currency, with the indirect rescue packages of Greece and other countries, you basically have also a kind of one fiscal union now.
So it was originally intended to be a monetary union, not a fiscal union. Originally, it was a...
Exactly.
Okay.
And also with the Corona package, basically indirectly you are there. I would welcome something like, okay, if, for example, if you keep the nation state, then let's look whatever percentage of votes for who becomes the German government should not only be voted by Germans, but also by others in Europe. And the same for Spain, the same for France. I think because you mandate a government to do something, and all what they do is basic, and there was a big discussion, is the European Central Bank violating its mandate? I believe we should at least start saying, okay, the moment there is elections of a parliament in a country, let it be 30% of the votes, everybody can vote who is in Europe. Because if you really mean to strengthen Europe, there is so many things which then Europe should be deciding. Let's talk about the foreign and security policy. It would be good if the mandate is stronger than just in your own country. So this problem that you have one parliament Europe, and then have this absurd thing, the German opposition parties, they sued the German government for agreeing to the European Central Bank to issue these bonds by which Greece was then rescued. And the German Constitutional Court then had to decide, this was a European decision, was this right according to the German Constitution or not? I mean, that's absurd. That's absurd. Why? Because, okay, if it's not right according to German Constitution, well, hang on, we are part of Europe. In Europe, it was done, it was considered okay. If now every member state has to pass their local constitutional courts, what is Europe? You imagine now in one, let's say in Austria, somebody would sue the Austrian government and say, look, you completely not fulfilled your task of protecting citizens by not ordering any vaccination. It was completely done by EU. And it goes up to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court says, yes, you're right, you deserve some compensation. What will the Austrian government say? One of the issues is that the mandate for European Union and Commission has never been clear. And still today it is not clear. It is always given, but it's not taken. So when there's a decision, okay, we decide on vaccination European-wide, well, why actually? Why? I mean, in the German government, it's known. The German health minister already was very far in agreement with AstraZeneca, with BioNTech, with Moderna, and then was called back by the chancellor saying, look, this is not nice. As a large country in Europe, we shouldn't do it in this way. Let this be done on a European level so that they order big amounts and then distribute to everyone. That it's not the biggest economy gets vaccination first, you understand?
I understand it, but
But if they would have want to do it, if they would have done it, they would have done it. So Germany would have had vaccination, other countries wouldn't have. That's what I mean. There's no clarity. This is what we do on this level. This is what we do on this level. This is what we do on this level. The mandate is not clear. And my fear is the mandate will not be clear as long as you don't at least reduce the role of national governments.
How do we reduce the role of national governments? Anarchy, basically.
No, you give more authority to Europe. You basically say, okay, on certain areas, look, there are areas where Europe should not be involved. You know, the principle of subsidiarity. Foreign security policy, I guess Europe should play a role, but a real role, not what is happening now.
Right now, it's just basically playing no sides, taking no sides.
Absolutely. So there is still, every country has its minister for defense, and this you can't have both. And then this guy is called the High Commissioner for Foreign Policy in the EU, Borrell, Spanish guy, right now. What this guy supposed to do? First call like 8 or 25 defense ministers and say, look, I'm flying there, what shall I say? I'm a bit simplifying, but what's this mandate about? At least start saying, okay, on national government levels, we will not have ministers for this and this portfolio. This will all be coordinated in Europe. Let's start with something small. But you know, the roles are not clear. And that's why Europe looks so bad, because national governments don't want to look bad. They will always make sure that they are, you know, keeping their voters happy. And that is a bit a vicious circle. And this has to be broken up. How do you break this up? Well, people have to voice it, like I'm voicing it now. And probably you need a real strong leader in the EU or EU Commission. I mean, that was the hope for some of the leaders in Europe. They wanted to convince Angela Merkel to run for this role. And somebody with this authority then to talk to the heads of states and say, look, guys, we need to clean up.
Would a situation like this need to be put to vote throughout Europe?
Of course, yes.
So
it would need to be put to vote, and it will also need to be basically pass all the constitutional courts. So yes, but Roham, I don't see a way out to get out of the symbolism. Europe so far is symbolism.
Absolutely, it's nothing more.
And it could be so powerful. So that is, and that's also why I mentioned before that, you know, national elections, there should always be a part where other countries also take part to make more and more also, you know, convergence. Get interested in other countries' politics. You know, if I would be a Greek or an Irish citizen, I would really feel, what do we have to say actually in Europe? The Germans and the French, they run everything. They're the two main nations. When Macron and Merkel agree something, this would be my feeling if I would live there. Okay, let's say, look, you can also participate, and your votes will only be, 10%, 15% of all votes for German parliament, but you can participate there. This would be revolutionary. And Germans, you can participate in all other countries. All your other countries' votes, you can participate in the Irish elections. You can vote. All the other countries' vote will only count, 10%, 20%. You can increase it over time, but start with something modest. But make people understand we are in one boat. Europe only works if we understand that we are in one boat. And now it is like there is 28 or more, I think, member states, 28 boats, and then there's one boat called Europe, and, you know, people walk sometimes over and come back.
No, it doesn't work.
And that's, in my opinion, the main issue. There's no clearly defined mandate for Europe where there's no way back, where there's no backup. But you say, this is your authority. This is what you do in Europe. And we take it seriously. We really send best politicians there. It is really important who are ministers, who are commissioners. We go out of these proportional stuff. It has to be always one this, one that, one that. But this has to be triggered by such changes.
This issue of I feel I'm a big fan of reform in general in politics, but I don't see any room for reform in pretty much any country that I have any amount of knowledge in. Starting from my own country to Europe on a regional level, on a European level, and basically, I mean, this is like a very international community. Everyone I've talked to from different countries, no one, at least from my generation, is happy about the governance of their country.
And that's Roham. That's what I told you. That is what I meant before with we have to recalibrate. What is the government? What is the role of government? What is the role and which political system do we want? There is a mismatch. If you look, parliamentary democracy, representative democracy, there were certain circumstances why this was created and why this was so forward-looking at some time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those circumstances are not valid anymore. They're just not valid anymore. And we have to basically at least start with some countries and do a convent and talk about, okay, what is our future political system? Why is it that politics is always so late, governments are always so inefficient? This doesn't have to be. So that is actually next 20 to 30 years one of the main questions to be answered. And why? Because there's pressure. We spoke about Europe. In Europe, the pressure is clear on nation states, but you also have the pressure of more and more companies who have basically taken more and more the role which usually only a state had. If you look at the whole discussion about which data is known by whom, whether it's Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Alibaba, A&T Financial, whoever, behind this is also a question, hang on guys, you are going too far. You're getting so powerful. We don't like this as a state. But they have this power right now. And there is and frankly, if you would have had the chance as a population to mandate someone to organize the logistics for vaccination, with all what I like or don't like, I would have said, Jeff Bezos, that's for you. Please, can we get 100 of your sharpest guys? We have a challenge in the world. 8 billion people need to be vaccinated. How can we get them vaccinated? I give you 8 months, develop a system.
They would do it in 6 months.
So, and the system would work, bam, like this. You see the situation, especially in Europe. I mean, it's appalling. Yeah. It's just appalling to see. That is and it was never clearer. Why do I come with this example? Very often it's always about priorities. It was never clearer than in the last 40 months, what is the priority of governments? We need to quickly get back to some normal life because every aspect of society is suffering. Economically, socially, psychologically, physically. Very simple. It was very clear what the priority is. They didn't manage it. They had 1 year.
And this was only a fire drill, basically, for the challenges that are coming in the next 2 decades.
Hopefully, the only good thing there, Roham, is hopefully people have seen this. Hopefully there are some self-critical politicians who say, look, we have to learn from that. This cannot be. We should be better. And the next pandemic will come and we should really learn from this and not anymore have these type of amateurish behaviors, which are basically purely driven by ego. governments felt, oh, we are really needed, so let's keep everything in our hand. No, it would have been time to create alliances and say, who can be with you? How can you do something? We knew one day there will be a vaccination, even if it would have been taking 2 years. No problem, but be ready. So you spoke about like existential crisis of the EU. I would say we have a like crisis of governance and governments, and the question, underlying question, how do we want to be governed in the future, and how should we be governed in order to achieve what a government is for, to basically ease life of citizens and protect their rights.
No, what really worries me in that is that if our politicians don't wake up to do that, some crazy guy, not gonna necessarily insult Karl Marx, but I'm not a big fan of his. Someone like that comes along and creates a new ideology, and that just leads to even more chaos and even more trouble. That I don't see that as being a good thing, but I see that as going as the direction that we're going towards, given that everyone has a voice now.
Look, I mean, we have seen a couple of experiments, and so far there has been always a bounce back. That at some point, as Abraham Lincoln said, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all of the time. And we have seen this in front of us. And we have seen how there have been political leaders, and some have been voted out again. So there is a mechanism that people at some point realize, okay, stop, this doesn't work. There is clearly an open question and a danger how governments will deal with the data question, and who will own which data and how confidential will it be. I mean, you see what is happening in some countries, and where this has become basically a scenario which, I mean, even George Orwell would not have dreamt of.
He would be having a heart attack every day in this world. Yeah.
It's so that will be a little bit a race, whether governments are quicker
or private,
or private citizens will stand up and say, stop, I mean, we need to define some borders. And even if you are the state, no way, you can't go in there.
I would love to continue this for much longer, but we are running out of time. So I'll ask you, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. What does love mean for Hannes Chopra?
Love means union for me. And why it is so profound, why I believe that actually the world is love, is actually the example I gave you before with the cup of ocean water from the ocean. Love is understanding that we are the same. We all belong together.
Removing that border, basically.
Exactly. It's basically seeing the water in every cup and relating to this. Seeing the imperfection you have, the imperfection others have, seeing that everything is explorative, nothing is finite, and the lesser you know, the lesser you like, the more you become inquisitive. That for me is actually love. Understanding that actually we are all one. And wherever I see this, I'm in love.
Beautiful. Do you have any, final question, do you have any book recommendations?
Oh.
Top 3, let's say.
I have many book recommendations, but I really find How Will You Measure Your Life from Clayton Christensen, a Harvard professor who actually became famous for his contributions to disruptive innovation. He also coined this term. And this is a bit a different topic. There's also a great TED Talk by him. about the value of life. I would for sure recommend from Swami Parthasarathi either The Fall of the Human Intellect or Vedanta treatise, which is very, I think, written in a very simple way, but very profound, very, very useful. Third book, I would recommend, frankly, any of the books of Dostoevsky. I adore Dostoevsky. I adore the profoundness of when he goes into human character. And why these books of him? Because they help you when you go into a dialogue with the book, which for me is the best way of reading. It helps you on what we discussed about parenting to become more self-aware and to ask yourself, if you would be this character, what would be the dialogue you would have?
I'm actually reading Crime and Punishment right now.
Okay,
and
great.
I read a lot of narrative books as a kid. I sort of stopped. I moved to nonfiction as a teenager, but now I'm sort of getting back to narrative books. And I've never related to a character, a fictional character, as much as I relate to Raskolnikov.
Yes.
I have empathy for a murderer. And that's insane.
Yes, yes. And when you read, I mean, there are books where I literally felt, my goodness, Dostoevsky has put a stethoscope into my soul. These thoughts, these, what is going on, this thinking forward, backward, this was very profound. I read it when I was a teenager. This would be some recommendations.
Do you read them in Russian now, Dostoevsky?
Actually, it's funny you're asking. I just got a few days ago from my favorite Russian writer. Actually, is Konstantin Paustovsky, an amazing writer in 50s, 60s, 70s in Russia. And I was searching for very long. I got his books in it's stories, short stories, stories of life. It's called, Erzählung vom Leben, and I have this in Russian. So this I'm reading in Russian now.
Nice.
Because I loved it in German and in English, and I really wanted to understand as Russian as a language it's a magical language, so profound, so deep, so many nuances. And I really want to try to get a bit into this. I don't know how much I will really understand, but I want to sense this. So this is what I'm reading in Russian.
That would be a dream. One day I can read Dostoevsky in Russian. That would be, yeah. Well, fantastic, Hannes. Thank you very much. I loved this conversation.
Thank you, Roham. Thank you.
No worries.
It was really a pleasure for me.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Great.